Hello, and welcome to a new edition of Design for the Times. I'm your host, Richard Christopher Scuderi. Well, today seems to be a day of going a little bit off topic because we're talking about things that affect your life and health, which are part of having, I think, a happy and a beautiful home. I have in studio a guest who's a personal friend of mine, a client, and also is working with me on sort of a new journey that I've been on these last 5 years. And her name is Myra Burley. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Rich. Lovely to be here.
Thank you for coming. I'm way down to studio. We're kind of talking about what Myra does. And I don't know which came first, us working on spiritual stuff together or whether I worked with her on her house, because we did in a previous show, we did her new home, soup to nuts, the whole thing, and it really came out spectacular. But one of the things that Myra does and I got involved in was meditation. Mm-hmm. So I was saying in the car, what would you call yourself? A meditation master, a spiritual, what would you say you call yourself?
A metaphysical teacher.
A metaphysical teacher.
I teach all the different aspects of metaphysical and spiritual work.
Right.
Meditation, past life regression, magic, Reiki, healing, crystals, as you said, soup to nuts. I have been studying for nearly 30 years, and I've studied with many important teachers. I have run my own meditation group in Hunterdon County.
Sure.
And I am part of a larger spiritual group in New Jersey that's been working on and off for 25 years together. And I kind of do it all as far as that goes.
Right. So I don't know, but I kind of have a feeling that Myra and I were destined to bump paths, because it just came about that everything fit together perfectly, right? I wrote a book about overcoming anxiety and depression, and a big part of healing anxiety and depression is spirituality. Myra, through a friend, was doing these wonderful meditation sessions at her home, and friends of hers in their homes, and it was at a time that it really healed me. So that sort of came together. And when my first book in May of 2017 hit, called The Lonely Boy, which I'll hold up, which is still out in print, I'm happy to say 5 years later, this book, it had become so successful that I got a call from Barnes & Noble that they wanted to represent me and put me on the book tour. Now, I thought about it, and I said, well, it's really nice to, have a beautiful book and to sign it. But when you bring people in, don't you want to articulate your message? So I thought about it a little bit, and I thought about some of the work that Myra was doing to help people live a better life, to be more spiritually aware. And I thought to myself, what if we came up with something called a conversation on good mental health, and then incorporated the different facets of mental health? And clearly, one of the facets of good mental health is to be spiritually aware and to be spiritually at peace with yourself. Don't you think that's a part of the process?
Absolutely. People seem to realize that the most important thing about spiritual work is finding what's right for you. And finding that place that gives you peace. It's part of self-care.
Right.
And self-care is so important for mental health.
Right.
And whether you meditate or whether you walk in nature or whether you take it even further, you need to do what it is that gives you peace, gives you comfort, and centers you.
Sure.
And gives you a place, of peace from the world around you, because our world is so chaotic.
And sort of toxic in a way. I think the past, I'd say 5 to 8 years have been just terrible, isn't it? We talk about this all the time, about the last number of years and how people are angrier. Things are moving physically faster, and we're in pretty rough times, aren't we?
Yeah, I do, and I believe, this is part of my belief system, we are moving faster. And this energy shift, which we're having, is difficult. It's difficult even for those of us who are doing the work. We still have those days. But for people who are, to me, they're kind of adrift. They haven't found something to anchor themselves to. I think they feel it even more, and a result of it is a lot of that is anger.
Sure.
And there is so much anger out there, and it's important to find a way to remove yourself from that.
And don't you feel that the world seems so divided, right? So divided.
It is, but I think that is part of the end, of an eon as we move into the age of Aquarius.
Right.
And it takes years and years to fully move in.
I always follow you with this stuff because I know that you really do your research. And you've kind of sort of calmed me by saying, we are going to, and other philosophers, other people in spirituality have all said we are transitioning into better. It's not going to stay like this.
No, but there is that period because everybody doesn't want to get on the bus, and but it is. I think the age of Aquarius is ushering in a time of peace,
right,
and a time of more harmony among people. But there is that point of getting there, and it takes, I think about 20 years, and we're only about 10 years in.
Wow. So we have a ways to go.
Others have said, I have a person I studied with who's an astrologer and a feng shui expert who's told me that we'll start to see massive change in 26. That's his opinion.
Right.
I hope he's right.
Good.
I hope it's 4 years down the
Towards
road.
positivity.
It's being positive. But the more people that we can help and make people strong and healthy, physically, mentally, I think that moves the energy along.
Sure. And that's one of the reasons I think, and we'll go through the other book in a few minutes, is that The Lonely Boy sort of resonated with people. And I'm doing something now to make it a little bit more personal, that if you go to my direct website, thelonelyboybook.com, I will, and put your information in, I will hand sign a personal message to you. So it'll come directly through me to you. So if you want to get a personal message or contact me, you'll be able to do it from the website. I've had many people even ask me questions. I'm glad to respond to you in a letter in addition to the book. But I think what this taught me is that I personally wasn't alone as the lonely boy in some of my fears and some of my feelings about the world and where I fit in that world, and issues with just depression or not being happy because other people were responding to that. Mm-hmm. And don't you think that's a part of spirituality, is sort of a continuum of energy and connecting together with each other, right?
Exactly. The idea is to connect. And when I read your book, people can relate to these things. Some people's lives are exactly like yours.
Exactly.
But well, mine wasn't, but there's definitely, you can relate to that feeling that everyone has, when we grow up and your family, like in my case, my family was extremely dysfunctional.
Sure.
And you don't realize that. You think that's normal, and you go out into the world and you bring with you these learned behaviors.
Sure.
That you learned, that you needed to survive in that home. But you don't need those to survive in the world. In fact, they're detrimental to the life that you want to live.
Sure, and then once you get out into the world, you sort of amend your behavior again to reflect what's around you now.
Right.
And some of those things are difficult to break because they're ingrained in you.
They are ingrained. And what it is you have to find what is best for you,
right,
not just what works to get you out of that particular situation.
Right.
You have to learn, looking at patterns, for me, is a very important part of doing spiritual work. We all have our patterns. This happens, we react this way. But we need to change those patterns. We need to look at them. One of the things that I did, like when I would get really angry, I would sit back and say, okay, so what are you really mad at? You're not mad because someone cut you off in traffic, or you're not mad, because you got overcharged on something. What is really, and then
What's
you
the
look
core?
back and you realize that this brings up a memory. This brings up a past of something that is very painful. And the more you look at it, the more you can help energetically to dissolve it.
Absolutely.
And as it dissolves, you won't have that reaction when those minor irritants happen.
What is if I could ask this, and maybe this is too personal for television, but what was your impetus in starting the journey of a spiritual quest? Because from what I know of you, because of course we're also friends, it doesn't seem that your early childhood lent itself to even thinking that way, much less I find that that's your career now.
Yeah, I think, for me it wasn't. As a child, for spiritual work, I went to church against my will, but I did, until I was old enough to say no. And I always had an interest in things like astrology and past lives, but I never really did anything about it. From 18 on, I was pretty much consumed with earning a living,
right,
supporting
you're starting
myself.
Your life.
And in your 20s, you're out and you're having fun, which is, a way it should be. And then as I got into my early 30s, I had met someone at work, a mutual friend of ours,
right,
and she gave me a book, and the book was called The Power of the Witch. And I remember holding this book and looking around and going, why'd you give me this? And she said, if anything, you'll love the history in it, because
Right.
I've always loved history.
Sure.
And I read that book, and it was written by Laurie Cabot, who is the official witch of Salem, who's like a lovely lady who's like 90 years old now, but she's still...
Oh, she's still around.
She's still alive. I saw her a couple years ago. And this book had so much about what you can do and change your environment. And so I began with very simple parts of magic. And then once I was reading that book, a teacher appeared. And it was a teacher about universal laws. And that teacher appeared. Then another person appeared, because I was told to go see Deepak Chopra. And I called up to get a ticket, and I met the woman who was promoting him, and I went to work for her, and I got to meet him. And this woman stayed in my life for 20 years. And then from that, I met another teacher, which opened up what, more deep spiritual work, as opposed to the outer stuff that I was doing. And then I became part of a modern day mystery school in North Carolina. And then when that teacher passed, I went out on my own and started teaching. And then many of our group got back together, and today we work together. And we teach separately, some of us, and do different things. So it was a journey. And interesting, the journey started for me in my early 30s, which seems to be a time for a lot of spiritual teachers, that's where you start to, something appears. And that's exactly what happened. Something was actually put in my hand.
Right.
And everything clicked after that.
Isn't that amazing?
And I never in my life have I ever thought, wow, I shouldn't have done this. I don't think I'd be alive. I wouldn't have made it through the tough times that were still to come.
What is a commonality in both my books and in our conversations just as people, there are a couple things that I think are very true, and I'm curious as to when I throw some things at you, as your take on it. And the first thing is cliche, there are no coincidences. I now believe, and part of it is the teaching I've been doing with you, and then my own life experience, and when my spiritual awakening started to happen, that things happen for a reason. You and I have discussed we're very different people, an unlikely friendship, but sometimes people enrich you because they come from different places, and that's part of our growth. How do you feel about that there are no coincidences?
I
know that's such a general term.
It's a general cliche. And I remember once having a teacher say to me, like you stub your toe on the table, that doesn't really mean anything. And I'm thinking in my head, well, it does. It's telling you to wake up and pay attention to where you walk. Everything does have some kind of a meaning.
Right.
Maybe it's a very minor meaning, or maybe it's a bigger meaning. And when I talk about patterns, one needs to look about things that are constantly reappearing. If you end up in the same situation over and over again. With a job, with a relationship, with a friend, where it all keeps happening exactly the same way, you can't say, well, it's my fault. You can't say it's their fault. What is it telling you? Everything in life is telling you something. Learn from those things.
Right.
So no, I don't believe there are coincidences. Things happen for a reason.
When you're saying about doing things over and over the same way, I think of the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting it to
Different
change.
result, yes, and it doesn't.
Sometimes I think people come to spirituality because of a tragedy. Sometimes people come to spirituality because life changes brought them to a place they never thought there'd be. I think there are a lot of different reasons why people go to spirituality. And I always want to identify between that is religious and that is spirituality. For you, what would you say spirituality is? Because I think it's quite different from religion.
Well, one of the sayings that I've always used is religion is doing what you're told regardless of whether it's right or wrong.
Right.
Spirituality is doing what's right regardless of what you're told.
Sure.
It's about finding your own path. And for some people, religion does work for them. But I have found in my personal thing that people who are way, way religious, whether it be in any faith, it doesn't matter which one, tend to have lost the perspective of what it all means to begin with, because the basis of everything is to love everyone else and to love yourself.
Sure, and I'm not going to religion bash. I think you grew up Christian, I grew up Catholic, and I found myself as I got older doing not eating meat on Friday with no significance to that. Okay. And I started to think, instead of not eating meat on Friday, why don't I shovel, it snowed a little bit today, why don't I shovel my neighbor's driveway who's older and not tell him who did it? And that my acts of kindness would be more purposeful. So I began to question my religion and some of the symbolism which didn't seem to really make change in the world. Do you follow what I'm saying?
I do, and I do. I mean, I grew up Protestant, and we didn't have some of those things.
Right.
But I've always thought, I mean, you know, in all the different spirituals, the paganism and the Buddhism, there's things you do and things you don't do, but there should be meaning behind it.
Sure.
You know, and I've said this before, I don't believe that the universal God Goddess cares what you wear, what day you worship, what you eat. You know, I don't think
any of that. If you had a ham and cheese sandwich by accident, you're not in trouble.
If you want a ham sandwich and have a ham sandwich,
right.
you know what? Those things don't matter. What matters is how do you live your life? What is your personal connection to whatever it is you consider the divine?
Absolutely.
Do you have a personal connection?
Right.
And you know, and do you recognize that your personal connection may not be for everyone else?
Oh, absolutely. And you have to sort of respect that.
Yeah.
Right? Even if it doesn't come from a good place, you have to respect that.
Right.
But those that do and have a spiritual awareness, I think, turn out to be better people.
Absolutely.
So my second book is a little bit more on the spiritual side, whereas the first book was more about getting through life and through anxiety and depression. But it was sort of on the precipice of me really working on the spiritual part of me. So the new book, which is just out, called The Enlightened Man, which is on Amazon.com, very easy to get, is more about my spiritual awakening. And really, my spirituality now serves as the primary source of my power as a person. Now, you know, I have a very successful interior design business, but my life decisions, the writing of the second book, all the educating I'm doing that we're working on together is really about my purpose. And I think spirituality and purpose go hand in hand. I don't know that if you felt that this was it in life and when it ended, you could be a good person, but I'm not sure you'd have the true experience of spirituality. How do you feel about that?
That is it, you know, and one of the things that I have found through what I do is you have your personal spiritual experiences.
Right.
You know, when you have, when you have a vision, when you have lucid dreams, because I do a lot of dream work, these things are telling you you're on the right path.
Right.
And that's a connection to everything. You know, people say, you know, you're connected to the divine. You're connected to everything because the divine is in everything.
Right.
And I think that connection is important. And I think for some people, you know, their spirituality is like maybe they go to church once a week and they don't think about anything else.
Right.
It was
mindless. It was mindless spirituality.
Mindless. And that's what I was kind of raised in.
Me
It's like
too.
you go to church and you behave yourself while you're there.
And you don't know why you're there, but you know
I
that's
don't really
the
know
time.
why I'm there. And I don't really understand any of this why. And you don't ask why. That was the first thing. You do not ask why. Well, if you don't behave, you go to hell. Why? Why? You know, nobody wants to answer those questions. And then you start to look at things, and I think having your own spiritual experiences, whether you do it through meditation, through dreaming, through vision quests, I mean, there's so many ways to do it. And I believe some people get that through prayer as well. Those experiences connect you. And that matters so much more than sayings, you know, that somebody crossed a river or someone died on the cross, whatever. Those are other people's experiences.
Right.
Those aren't your personal ones.
Right.
And that's what I think is so important. And once you have those, and it energizes you, because then you're like, okay, this is meaningful. You know, when you start to dream and the things in your dream start to happen and you start to see that you do have some control over your environment with your thoughts and your actions and your behaviors, then you start to realize that big connection.
And it becomes very powerful.
And it also makes you feel stronger and safer because, you know, there's a point I know, and I went through this when I was younger, where you feel like there is no control over anything.
Yes.
It's like stuff is just going to keep happening to you, and you're
you're a victim of it.
And you're a victim, and you're battered over here and battered over there.
Right.
And now it's like, when I'm in a bad situation, and then still, I mean, in the midst of all my powerful spiritual work, my brother dropped dead. I never thought that would happen.
Well, you've had a lot of tragedy.
I've had a lot of tragedy, but that one happened after I did the work.
Right.
So it's not like when you do the work, life goes perfectly, but how I react to it.
It's exactly
the difference.
Exactly that. It's the difference is how you process it.
Process it. Without my spiritual work, I think I would have committed suicide after his death.
I'm so sorry to hear that. Right.
I mean, that was probably the worst thing that has ever happened to me. And I just grabbed onto my spiritual work. There's a reason for this. He's in a better place. You know, this is the way it's meant to be.
And maybe we're talking about your brother passed when he did, partially because you were at a right place to receive the message then, whereas maybe 3
Yes.
years before it would destroy you.
Yeah, really,
Right.
it would have destroyed me. Yeah.
So I think that, I don't know, my perception of spirituality and understanding is all of our true purpose. Not everybody will get there. Not everybody can get beyond the physical world, because most of spirituality, you don't see, it's something you feel. But it certainly, I think, makes you higher up in the world.
Right.
And not in terms of money or intelligence, but you're at a higher
creates
level.
It creates those things too. It does create.
Oh, it does
material
create
things.
those things.
You know, you can create material things once you're clear about how you're doing it and what you want. The universe will give you what you want. And the problem is, most of us have been taught to focus on what we don't have,
Right.
which gives you more of what you don't have.
Correct.
And focus on the negative. And once you turn that and you begin to focus on the positive,
You can become powerful.
powerful, whatever it is you want.
Right.
But of course, then it is your responsibility to use that power appropriately. Not over people, to help people, to lift people up, you know, to create good things is a responsibility.
I think it's a normal thing that when you go through spirituality and you understand how it all works and life is part of a bigger picture, you naturally become a better person because you want to be, because you realize the people down the street from you aren't strangers, you're on the same path.
Right.
Maybe you're walking alongside each other. You treat those people differently, and I think you treat them better. Am I too simplistic in saying
No,
that?
it is that. It simply is about, that's the bottom line, being nicer to people. You know, the Dalai Lama said once, for people, since most people won't get there,
Right.
the best thing is don't create any extra karma. You know,
Right.
don't go out of your way to do things that will hurt. We all get karma accidentally. We all say and do things that we realize maybe later we shouldn't have. But don't go out of your way to create it. Go out of your way to create good karma.
But, you know, just offering acts of kindness, some people set some people off a little bit. And I'll tell you a funny story about Myra. Myra goes to a salon that I went to once, and I was in the salon. The salon owner came over to me and said, "Myra is such a nice person." And I thought, "Oh, that's very true." And then she went, "Why is she so nice?" Because some people, when your head is clear and you're not in the middle of a crisis or something,
Right.
if you are spiritual and you are aware, it feels good. You can innately know to do nice things because it's part of your growth as a person while you're here in the physical world.
Right.
So some people think, because we are in the physical world, that if you're doing an act of kindness, it's because you're looking for something. And I know you're not. I wasn't saying it for that reason. But do you know what I mean about that? You
Yes.
can unnerve people by acts of kindness. I happen to be an empath, and people can be, you could have a very good reaction to it, but sometimes not. Now, that case was a good reaction because she was giving you a compliment, but her thought was, why would you be nice?
Well, you know what it is, and I spent a lot of years in a very chaotic state,
Right.
and realizing I was probably rude to people, only because I was so in my own head, and I was so in my own stuff, and now I'm not. And I think one of the things is gratitude, and we can't not talk about spiritual without talking about gratitude. And you know what?
Very
I am
important.
grateful that at this point in my life, I can afford to go to the hair salon,
Right.
and get my hair done and my nails done, because I didn't get a manicure till 7 years ago,
Right.
because I
Wow.
didn't have the money for stuff like that. And there's a gratitude to that when you walk in. It's like, oh, I'm so lucky that I'm here. I'm so lucky that I'm still alive. You know, this past year or two, you know, the class of high school that I graduated with, half of them are gone, and
Really?
you know, they're
And
dying every once
you're
a
pretty
month.
young. I'm shocked.
Yes, and it's like, I lost another friend last week.
I'm sorry.
A friend I hadn't seen in a while, but a friend, and you know, and my high school boyfriend died 8 months ago. So the fact that I'm here is that, and I think the spiritual work is part of that, because it gives you this connection to life, and you get to make more choices. I like to think that when the time comes, I will be ready to make that transition.
Right.
But until then, I want to operate with positivity, with gratitude, because since I started doing that, my life is so much better.
Right? You've grown so much as a person, and good things have come into your life.
A lot of good things
And
have
a lot
come,
of good
yes.
people around you, right?
I have wonderful people. I have wonderful friends like you and my spiritual friends and the students that I've been lucky enough to teach and have an impact on their life. You know, I've been very lucky. But that, again, is when you start to become really clear, you'll notice there's some people don't fit in your world because you have a dynamic with them that's not healthy. You know, and I've noticed that, and to me that was one of the sadder things, is that I've lost a few friends along the way.
And that will happen as part of your spiritual journey.
It's part of your growth.
Yeah.
You know, they need to go off on their path. You know, and your being there maybe isn't helping them. You know, I like to think maybe I'm helping them, maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm enabling a behavior that they will give up, if whatever. But you have to sometimes let people go, and then I don't have a lot of new people coming in, but every now and then they do come in. You know, you can still make good friends. Like I said, we only met 6 years ago.
Right.
You know, even up in your 50s and 60s, you can still make new friends.
Exactly. And
when they are the right people
that.
for your life.
Exactly.
You know?
We have in our brain something called neuroplasticity. It is never too late to change. It's never too late to reinvent yourself, and it's never too late to grow. We have about 2 minutes left, and I want to talk about our new exciting journey with the new book, The Enlightened Man. Myra is going to be with me with a panel of several other people, a licensed clinical counselor, a medical doctor, and several other people. And we're going to begin touring again around the tri-state area. Myra's going to talk about spirituality. I'm going to talk about life experiences, overcoming anxiety and depression. And we're going to give you sort of a well-rounded view at local Barnes & Nobles. We'll also be, we booked today, the Italian American Club of Southern New Jersey, which will be at Yesterday's Restaurant sometime in November. I have one coming up. We're going to do one in, believe it or not, Easton Allen. And we have wonderful dates. The seminars are all free. They're typically about an hour or so. Ask questions. They're interactive. And you really do learn a lot, I think, don't you? You meet nice people. You meet people that are open to change and kindness. And I think you can't help from be better. When you start to examine things, it can't help you do anything that would help you be better.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, Myra, I thank you for being my guest. If you'd like to reach me about any of the upcoming dates of our tours of good mental health, you can contact me at 908-884-0770, 908-884-0770, or you can reach me through email, through my business email, which is www.maven, M-A-V-I-N, Hill, H-I-L-L, Designs, D-E-S-I-G-N-S, at gmail.com. I'll be sure to be putting out on my social media our upcoming dates.
Okay.
We'll have some teases of what's going to come next. And I thank you for being a part of my journey. You certainly have enriched my life.
Thank you so much. I love being here.
Thank you.